Today we'll continue on with our exploration of self-directed learning. Self-directed learning is great. It's good for career development. It's really helpful just to learn new topics. Talked a little bit in past episodes about how you can leverage it to stay up to date with what's happening in the world of generative AI and some of how you can use AI tools to help you in your own self-directed learning. But in order to be an effective self-directed learner, there are some prerequisites, mainly that you learn how to sort of manage your own learning independent of structure. So that's what we're going to dive into today. So I'm looking forward to chatting about that with you. So welcome to the Talk to Me PDD podcast, where I, your host, PDD, talk about all things knowledge work, leadership, people management, many things about the world of AI and how technology is impacting society and our life. So I'll pause briefly for a little bit of self-promotion. I don't do this probably nearly enough, but if you like this content, please like and subscribe. I really enjoy listening to podcasts through the audio version. So if you're watching this on YouTube, there are also audio versions on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So please check it out there. I'm going to do this regardless. I really like talking about this stuff. These topics are interesting to me, but it means a lot if you would like and subscribe. It lets me know that people are out there and encourages me to do it. Probably that I don't need it, but it's nice to have anyway. So today is episode 34, and we're going to talk about learning to learn in the context of higher education. So college, university, post-high school education. Now, college, traditional four-year program is, of course, not the only way that you can learn how to learn. There's lots of different types of learners, different people, different life experiences. So when I talk about this, it's not the only way to do it, but it is a common way. And I think this is a goal of the higher education system that's been there for some time, and it's something that we should focus on. Now, there's certainly many things that I think you could criticize universities for. I'm not a deep expert in that area. Had some discussion in some LinkedIn threads, but certainly I think there's room for criticism on that. So this is not necessarily about how higher education is successful or not in preparing for careers or practical work experience or return on investment or anything like that. It's purely focused on the goal of developing individuals going through those programs who are effective at learning how to learn. So we're going to examine three different areas that I think higher education can help with. One, which I would consider a prerequisite for learning how to learn, and then two more sort of tactical areas where going into sort of the details of building learning plans and doing it at different levels. So starting with the first one, which I would consider a prerequisite, is the skill of critical thinking. And again, that's certainly something that you can develop independently, but I do think it's much more easily facilitated when you're in a learning environment or a group environment that can help bring different perspectives from different people that you're with and sort of set up a structure where you see how you can bring in different sources and different sides of an issue and examine those and think through them, potentially being forced to defend different sides of an argument. And while you can do this on your own, it takes a little bit more intention, and having the experience of going through it in a group and being kind of presented material that sets us up well. It's nice to have someone do that for you, at least initially. And then that's something that you can take forward. You can do it on your own as you're attempting to learn new areas or explore them. That's something that I recommended for learners in the AI space, being able to take sources from, different perspectives or, quote unquote, different sides and sort of the current focus on Gen AI boosterism versus not. You can apply that to anything that you're trying to learn, but having some experience going through it, being forced to go through a debate, listen to other sides of an argument, present them, and potentially argue both sides, is not something that I think naturally happens or is easy to do just as an individual. Being in a group where you sort of have those ground rules and some refereeing of that can be helpful to do it in a way that is productive as opposed to argumentative. And then that's just going to help you make more informed decisions about information and content in general, which is helpful in all sorts of different aspects, not just the learning one. And then the last piece of it is getting to know yourself as well. What are your own biases or approaches to looking at different types of issues, and we all have them. But having some opportunity to get to know those so you can mitigate them, or at least be aware of why you might have a particular reaction to a type of issue, or how you might want to learn about something, or which side you might more naturally fall down on, or fall on. And once you're self aware of those, it's going to help you be more objective in your approach to taking in new content and looking at different sides. So that's the first one. Critical thinking, definitely a prerequisite for learning how to learn, going in and executing on a learning plan, especially when it's something where um, it's not just objective content that's already been agreed upon. Oftentimes in our careers, we're learning how to learn to stay up to date with new developments. And often those aren't necessarily finalized in an objective state. We have to make decisions with incomplete information, and being able to um, analyze that information and look for the parts that you think are valid versus not can help you do that. So now getting into sort of the two more tactical areas about thinking about how university helps develop this skills to learn how to learn. When I think about learning how to learn, I break it down in a couple different stages. So you have a goal, which is your overall learning objective. And then once you know that goal, you're going to need to build a work back plan. So from that goal, what's the stage before that you need to get to, and then back and back and back to where you are today. So you can map out the various stages that you need to go through to get there. Once you have that work back plan, knowing how you're going to be able to schedule that and work with prioritization. So most of the time, especially in our professional lives, we don't have unlimited time. We don't have unlimited attention. We don't have unlimited resources. So if we're pursuing these learning goals, we're going to be doing it in a broader context. And we need to be able to take a high level work back plan and actually break it down into scheduled chunks that we can implement and we can prioritize within the given things that we have going on at that time. And that may mean that there's only particular things that we can take on at a time. You can't likely pursue every learning goal that you might want to at the same time. You're going to have to choose based on the available resources that you have. So now once you've gotten it down to that scheduling and prioritization, there's the actual execution of it. How do you go about and do that work, consume that content, um, synthesize it if you're building something from it, whether it's, writing a paper or analysis of something, writing some code, implementing a system, spending time studying. Eventually, you're going to have to do that. And there, all four of these, there's different kind of skills and practices that you can develop. So, starting from a high level goal, building a work back plan, taking that work back plan, breaking it down into a schedule that works for you, and understanding how that's going to be prioritized within all of the other things that you need to do. And then lastly, being able to execute on it. So that's kind of a high level way that I look at it. Now, you're going to do that at a couple different levels. And I think the higher ed can help with both of those because you're going to get experience in both and you're going to see how others structure that before you have to do it yourself. And you're going to get a sense and a feel for what that looks like. So at the macro level, you could think about your major, your course of study, core classes that you have to take, or general requirements, and what that's going to look like overall. So your high level goal there is to graduate with a particular degree, and then breaking that down into how you're going to take those classes over a 4 year or however long period it is. Within each given semester, how many classes you can take towards that goal with the other priorities that you have. And then how do you actually go and execute on each of these classes? So we'll talk about that one in a second, but that's sort of what I think of as the macro view of learning how to learn in higher ed. And then at the more micro level, within an individual course, you're going to have the same type of breakdown. Your goal being to complete the course, to learn and demonstrate you understand the material in the course. To look at the particular syllabus throughout the semester. When are assignments due, when you need to do certain things, so you can understand um, what that schedule is going to look like. And then some of those pieces will be scheduled for you, but a lot of it you're going to have to determine on your own within that context of the work back plan. So when are you going to study or read different content or learn different things? And that's all has to be prioritized as well, right? Because you're likely not only doing that one course. Um, and then lastly, how do you sort of execute on learning individual pieces of content? So macro level, major, program, general requirements. Micro level, individual course, executing that successfully. Um, Now, at the macro level, this is something that can translate very well into the professional world. So you could think about this as if you're have a career plan that you've developed, you're trying to work towards either a promotion, a lateral change, or some other type of move from where you are now. Um, it's the same type of execution at that level. It's not likely just going to be sort of one piece of training or coursework that you need to do. It's going to be a variety of different things. So you can think about that at the macro level and the way that you went through and planned how you would execute on a major with all of the different requirements. It's going to be very similar to how you would execute on a career move. Now, the difference is that in one case, it's largely planned out for you. And when you're doing it on yourself in professional life with a career, you have to do that yourself. But I think it's really helpful to have gone through that once and experience what that feels like and how it's structured and how much you can take on at a given time and what that all looks like. And then also understanding that there are dependencies, just like you might have a course that you have to take at one point before you take the next one in a progression towards a major. When you're navigating a career transition or trying to develop a certain capability, you may need to break it down and look at the dependencies in knowledge and learning, and then you can use that to build your work back plan and to do the scheduling. And there may be certain things that are only available at certain times, and those will all be factors. So again, this is why I think it's really useful to go through this higher education experience, because you're going to be exposed to that and it's going to be put together in a way that is somewhat done for you. So as long as you follow more or less along, you're going to be successful. You're going to have some ability to direct it on your own, but you're not going to have to do the whole thing. So having gone through that, then I think you have a model that you can replicate when you're trying to do the same thing within your career goals or whatever your learning goals are at a high level, and where it may involve multiple different courses and things like that. And then lastly, kind of going back to that micro level, when you're actually executing that, you build sort of that discipline and understanding of what that's like to actually go through that, and being able to carry that forward into a professional context where, again, it's not as much laid out for you, and you're going to have to be responsible for managing most of that yourself. And it may even be pulling the materials together on your own if you don't have a particular course that meets the learning goal that you're looking for. So it may be even designing your own course syllabus, figuring out how for that mini learning goal or that learning goal that cascades up to a broader plan, whether that's for a career move or just building your own skill sets. What do those individual pieces look like? Those individual goals. Then within those individual goals, what does a work back plan look like there? For example, the sort of taking a certification, which I talked about in a previous episode, that's something that's going to be a micro level learning goal. So the goal is that you understand the material, you complete the certification, then you have to understand, okay, what's the work back plan? What do I need to study here? What are the different tasks? Then how am I going to schedule those things within, my work, my life, the other things that I have going on, any other learning goals? How do I prioritize this? If I prioritize this, maybe I have to say no or deprioritize some other things for the time being. And then the last piece, which didn't really talk about a lot, but is really important, like how do you actually execute on that studying? And I think you can learn a lot about this in higher education. You also have the ability to learn from mistakes and observe mistakes that others have. If you've ever waited for the last minute and tried to cram in some studying or reading some papers that take time to absorb, or maybe starting a project that you should have spent a couple of weeks in advance doing towards the end, that that's often not the most effective way to do things. It certainly can work but I would say it's not ideal. So being able to understand that, and as you're executing on your learning in your professional life or post education life, that's useful to have experience with that as well. I mean, even simple things like how you focus, what types of things are distracting, how you create an environment that works for you in learning, having kind of the luxury of going through that in a lot of different um, iterations when you're in a higher ed setting gives you that practice and that experience that you can learn yourself a little bit. In the same way that as a new and career professional, you often learn a lot just from the behavior that others are modeling, what it means to be a professional. I think being in the higher education environment, you get to observe how other people are approaching their learning, absorb different things that you see as helping them be successful, or maybe avoiding things that that are not helping them be successful. Um, so I found that very helpful, being able to take my experience in higher education, how I approached learning, and it wasn't perfect at that time. It's not perfect now, but being able to look at it as a practice and continuing to develop that, um, and to leverage those skills and experiences now in professional life to be able to drive my own learning. And I think it's more effective because I've seen systems where it's been set up that I can model. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. Now, all that being said, there's many ways to learn how to learn. Many people are coming from different backgrounds, so this isn't the only way. But I did want to kind of touch on it and why I see this aspect of higher education continuing to be extremely valuable going forward, um, regardless of sort of the career preparation side of higher ed. The How it's able to help you learn how to learn is something that I see being very durable as a skill. And regardless of the technologies that change, those of us that are more skilled at learning how to learn and more comfortable doing that, um, can be more successful if we apply it. So that's it for now. Hopefully that was interesting for you. Whether you've had these experiences in higher ed or not, or taken a different path, hopefully the concepts of building your critical thinking as a prerequisite, and then thinking about breaking down your learning goals into macro and micro levels, and using the same planning system of goal, work back plan, schedule, prioritization, and execution will be helpful to you. Good luck in your learning, and until next time, thanks for watching.